All right, welcome back. Let's finish off this unit. Today we're going to talk about the Reformation. Reformation is a big event, a big deal, and you need to know a couple of things about it. Martin Luther, he's going to be the person, and what does he do? He posts 95 theses at the door. I think it's called Wittenberg Church, if I remember correctly. And one of the things he's protesting, remember, he's going to start the Protestant movement. It's a protest movement, okay? Let's talk about that in a minute. One of the things they're protesting are indulgences, okay? So you need to know what those are. Predestination, John Calvin, that's up to you. Council of Trent, federalism. Some of that is front-loading you for 7th and 8th grade. Let's get going here. Okay, so what was the Reformation? A movement against corruption in the Catholic Church. At this time, the church has already split, so you have Catholic Church and you have Eastern Orthodox Church, and those are pretty much your two Christian churches. That's it. There's just two. And then the Catholic Church is going to split, and then Protestant is going to split and split and split, and then you get to where we have today, over 100 different denominations. If you survived in the Black Death, how did that actually benefit you? Exactly. You were worth more money. Okay, you could charge more for your labor. You also had a stronger immune system. What does Renaissance mean? Rebirth. Give me two Renaissance artists. Just think Ninja Turtles, okay? Just think Ninja Turtles. Let's see here. I don't have a Ninja Turtle sound. Michelangelo, Leonardo. Okay, very good. So here's some of the problems with the church. They got too much power. They've grown rich. The Pope became too political. Things like that. What I want you to know is an indulgence. An indulgence is basically a letter that says you are forgiven of sin. And the indulgence would cost, in today's money, anywhere between $10,000 and $30,000. Okay, so they're getting 10, depends on what your income is, but they're getting 10, 30, 50% of your income, something like that. And they say, look, you give us this large amount of money, and then we'll just write that you're good to go. Okay, that's what an indulgence is. Okay, you pay money and you're all good. Well, Martin Luther comes around and says, hey, wait a second, I don't see this indulgence system in the Bible. We should reform the church. And at that time, the Bible is primarily written in Latin, and most people read, if they can read, they know German, and so by him translating the Bible, he's allowing everybody to read it, okay?
The Protestant Reformation of the 16th century shook the very foundation of Europe's cultural identity. The Reformation was a revolution of religion in Western Europe. Essentially, it was the result of centuries' worth of political and social grievances against the Christian church as it existed. Christianity, which began as a fledgling religion in the 1st century, had grown by the 13th century into an institution powerful enough to rival state governments. For instance, the Pope, then the leader of the Christian church, had greater political and military influence than some emperors and kings. However, one of the most well-known advocates for a reformed Christian church was a German priest named Martin Luther. Martin Luther began to question the church in the early 1500s. He believed it was abusing its power and disagreed with some of its practices. For instance, he challenged the church's doctrine that stated the Pope, not the Bible, was the ultimate spiritual authority. Plus, he criticized the church for selling indulgences, the practice of purchasing forgiveness for one's sins by giving money to the church. Luther believed the church needed to revise its doctrine by returning to the Bible's teachings and by saying that salvation could be granted by faith in Christ alone. So on October 31st, 1517, Luther took a stand. In what's considered the birth of the Protestant Reformation, Luther is said to have nailed 95 theses, or arguments against the church, onto the door of Castle Church in Wittenberg, Germany. Luther was later put on trial in front of church officials to defend his theses, but in January 1521, the church declared Luther a heretic and excommunicated him. While Luther's membership with the church ended, the Reformation he argued for started to gain momentum. Unlike Luther's predecessors who challenged the church, Luther had one tool at his disposal that they didn't have: the printing press. This new invention allowed his arguments to be copied and spread across Europe. This unprecedented access to ideas such as Luther's inspired many others to challenge the church, thereby splitting Christianity into two major denominations, Catholic and Protestant, from the word protest. Also, the Bible became more accessible. Luther and other reformists translated biblical text from Latin, which was only known by nobility and church officials, to German, English, and French, languages spoken by the general public. While the Protestant Reformation revolutionized the Christian faith, it had ramifications that extended beyond religion. Prior to the Reformation, many Europeans were dependent on an educated upper class. But perhaps the most resounding impact of the Reformation was that the common people were empowered to question religion and other aspects of life. The Reformation, along with technological innovations and the introduction of other new ideas, gave many in Europe's general public the freedom and power to decide their own fates.
If you're teaching something that goes against the church, what's that word? What's that called? No, heresy. All right, it's called heresy. Very good. The Protestant movement basically says you can talk to God directly. You don't need the Pope per se, or the Bible is more important than the Pope. The concept of predestination starts, God knows who's going to be saved before they were born. This goes into America, by the way, even in the First Great Awakening, and it's really not until the Second Great Awakening where the idea of free will takes hold. So this is going to be the dominant theory of the time and for a while. Okay? Don't worry. Hey, look, I'm babbling a little bit. Look, by this point in the lesson, you should know who nails the 95 Theses to the wall. Okay, Martin Luther. Good job. And what are the 95 Theses? What do they say? They say they're a list of all the things that the church is doing wrong. One of them is paying you. They're taking money. What's that called? When they take money and then they say you're all good and you're forgiven of sin. An indulgence. Okay, you should know the vocab word indulgence. You should understand who Martin Luther is, and you should know the event 95 Theses. Does that make sense? If you know that, we're good. Let's keep going. Who's Machiavelli? What does he say? Let's give you a star power. Right. He's that guy that says, look, you don't have to be good as long as you pretend to be good, have someone else do the dirty work. Okay, very good. Who painted this? Let's get you some Jeopardy music here. Who painted this? Exactly, Michelangelo. Who made this statue? Michelangelo. Okay, who painted this? Very good, very good. Okay, Leonardo da Vinci. Now let's talk about the printing press. Okay, Johannes Gutenberg invents the printing press. We've heard of the printing press from 1,000 years ago. Who invented it before he did? The Chinese, remember? But it didn't take off because they had 2,000 characters in it, so it was hard to use. But now he's going to invent the one that becomes popular and that they use it. Here's what you need to know about the printing press. Two things. One, I can now read the book. You can now read the book. Your friend can now read the book at the same time. And then we can talk about it. And the knowledge, human knowledge, is going to explode, okay? The other thing is, Who was it that nails the 95 Thesis? Who was it? Okay, Martin Luther. When Martin Luther nails his 95 Thesis, they could have just ripped it off the door and thrown it away, and then that would have been the end of it. But because of the printing press, they can stamp it out 1,000 copies. You can't keep it down. Does that make sense? And so that's the printing press and the Reformation go together in the sense that without the printing press, the movement would not have been able to maintain. It wouldn't have been able to sustain itself. Okay. As people start getting more power in their church, they're going to want more power in their government. And Book wants you to know what federalism is, and I do too. So let me show you what federalism is. Don't write all this down. Just take a look. In a unity government, the top part of the government tells the subordinates, the states, what to do. Example, this is like England or something, okay? In a confederate government, the states tell the national government what to do, and the states have the power, okay? Which system do we have? Unity or confederate? Trick question. We have both. We have what's called a federal government, okay? If it comes to the speed limit, unless there's a war or an emergency or things like that, the state can decide what laws we have for the roads, what laws you have for schooling, a lot of different things, a lot of different services the state provides. But when it comes to printing money or national defense, then that's only the federal government. Does that make sense? Okay, that's called federalism. But what they're trying to get you to understand is so you were powerless during the during the Middle Ages. You're gaining power in the church, and you're saying, wait a second, we're doing a good job here. We should take over the political arena, and we should take over that. Does that make sense? Okay, that's it. Tomorrow there'll be some Jeopardy, and then on Thursday you'll have your last unit test, and the learning keeps on going. And I hope you guys are doing well. Take care.